Okay, good morning. I'm Michael David Cobb Bowen, and I'm catching you early in the morning, and that's why my hair looks a mess. But I'm also a mad professor. I want to talk to you today about a kind of transformation that everybody's afraid about, but I think I understand some fundamental truths about. And we're going to go through this in a metaphor of a castle. And I'm sure there's a lot of, George R. R. Martin or J.R.R. Tolkien fans. Whether or not you are, we all understand the medieval times in which we are protected in our castle by a moat. And it turns out that a moat is one of those 21st century paradigms that we talk about in terms of keeping our businesses safe. Because once you figured out a business, somebody with more money could come and take your business away from you. They may take your customers, they may take something about your intellectual property that is not perfectly secured, they may take your location, they may take any number of innovative things to get at your business. And what we have now is an opportunity which is unique because of technology, but it is not the technology. Now, I know that sounds ironic, but let's talk about artificial intelligence. What is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence is the ability of machines to do things that we didn't think machines could do. Okay? And that makes it a different kind of tool, which makes it a little weird and spooky for us to talk about it. We don't think about that when we say, I'm going to make a machine that will create memories and that people will talk about, but it won't be a person. Well, that's film. That's what we do with books. That's what we do with music. That's what we do with film. But we don't look at a camera, or we don't look at a French horn, or we don't look at a printed page and say, oh, it must be conscious. It must be conscious. It is a tool that we use to learn. That was the original idea behind motion pictures. They were supposed to revolutionize education. And whether we like it or not, they have. The question is it a good film? Is it a good book? Is it a good song? Is this something that should last in our consciousness? So we collaborate with tools, and we always have, to shape our human existence. But they don't have to be conscious, they don't have to be magical, and they don't necessarily have to take away our jobs. Music in elevators didn't take away anybody's job. It enhanced the job that we had, up to a point. Okay? So, and when the technology actually does replace a job, like a TV repairman or a milkman, we don't lament that because it happens slow enough in our society, and that's called diffusion. And we'll talk about diffusion in a little bit, so that we're prepared for it. And there will always be holdouts like me. I think cars with stick shifts, manual transmissions, are superior to cars with automatic transmissions. That didn't change the fact that when I was a kid, I wanted my mother to buy that new Ford Granada with an automatic transmission. All right? So there is benefits to automation. There are, and we don't have to make a fetish of the fact that it helps us do intelligent jobs. I came of age in my business life. Excuse me. As an intern at Xerox Corporation down here in El Segundo, California, and I went through 3 of them along with the MDA program because I was a little bit older undergraduate than the ordinary undergraduate, and so I did 3 of those terms, and I learned something very interesting watching management. Because at that time, all I wanted to do was get into corporate America and find out how it worked, and be among these people. You know, I had this vision like LA Law. That's how I thought corporations worked. But I soon discovered that it was much more complex and nuanced than that. At any rate, As I left school and became a full-time employee, I was programmer analyst, and I discovered something fairly new, that even in this company that bought and sold computers and printers in the market, management, the leadership and the executives and the managers and the VPs, they all had the same attitude about computers. Yes, we are in the computer business, but I am an executive and I don't touch them. Ew. Get it away from me. Computers are for clerks and secretaries and receptionists and engineers, but not managers. So I had this idea that was, we're going to computerize everything that's computerizable. All right? And we were guided by something called the idea of human augmentation, which is something I already mentioned, which is sometimes you are more effective at a tool or with a tool than you are without a tool. And you can turn that into competitive advantage. An example that you might use to keep in mind is, let's say I have a page of text here. All right. You're immediately drawn to the yellow parts of that text. It doesn't matter what was on that page. You have that evolutionary snap in your mind that allows you to calculate that very quickly. We have yet to build a robot that can catch a fly ball or that can hit a fastball. But we've been doing that all of our lives because it was to our evolutionary advantage to learn how to do hand-eye coordination. All right? And so that's one of the things that we can do. We can also find quick movement in our peripheral vision, which is tuned differently than in the center of our vision, which our color perception is more acute. But our peripheral vision is black and white, quite frankly. So there are always things that humans are going to do better than computers. And thankfully, that will be making babies. And that's one of the most joyful of human activities. And so we will always be able to extract our joy from those things, like eating creme brulee or enjoying the warmth of the sun on our skin on a breezy summer day. Those are things that are always going to be human experiences. And sure, some engineer will figure out a way to do that in a computer system or computer simulation or draw an animation of robots actually enjoying sitting in the sun, but that's not the same thing. Okay? So let's understand with the strengths of human thinking when combined with the strengths of computer thinking. All right? Now, artificial intelligence is the surprising amount of stuff that we can figure out that computers can do that we didn't think they could do. We didn't think they could look at a film and tell us what's going on. We didn't think that they could take an image and do Photoshop of it. And Photoshop hasn't existed for all of our lives, for some of our lives, for sure. But taking red eye out of a photo, that's new. Only experts used to be able to do that. Now you can do that with your smartphone. Okay? Are we mad that dark rooms with chemicals have basically disappeared from our lives? Some of us, yes. All right? Some of us who learned how to process photographic negatives, but it has taken a long enough time, okay? And the Kodak company still exists. And there are still things for film that exists. So if I'm saying we can coexist with these intelligences, and it takes a long time for the new technologies to diffuse and replace human jobs, why are we all panicking? We're all panicking because we don't know exactly how it applies to us. So now I'm going to return to the moat. I'm going to return to the castle. The castle is the business that you have built over the years. And the shape of the moat is not a perfect donut. And nor is your castle a perfect square. And nor is it like any other castle in the realm. All right? That moat exists and gives us comfort in our place because it has survived the Battle of 2008. It survived the end of the world crisis in 2012. It survived in 2019 when nobody could fly around the world. Okay? And it survived the attempted escape of the princess in 2022. And each battle that it went through, it changed its shape a little bit. And some of it was changed by external forces, and some of it was changed by accident, and we didn't know it. But we know it's our moat. We know it keeps us safe. What is artificial intelligence going to do? And the answer is you have to build it around your moat. You have to build it around the processes that make your business your business. Wherever you are in your industry, whether you're in healthcare or aviation or film development or building surfboards, there's something that makes you different than everybody else. And guess what? That's the intelligences that you have applied to the processes that are disciplined into your business. And your customers will come up with ways to challenge you, and then you'll have to respond to that. And you'll succeed or fail, but then it changes the shape of the capabilities of your entire organization. Or it makes you more dependent on Susan in shipping, which is okay, because Susan wants to be here. Susan knows she's a part of this. It's her handprint on the wall that makes that wall different than any other wall in any other castle, and that's what we want to capture. Okay? We want to be able to get AI to say, let's customize the software that we have. Now, I'm going to jump back because I've left a subject alone that I started. And that starting subject was how managers used to think about computer systems in the 80s. And in the 80s, again, it was, I'm not going to touch this. I am the director of finance. All right, I'm the VP of finance at the group level. And I have all of these divisions that I have to consolidate their books and close. And you will work 60-hour weeks come week 3, because if we can't get those numbers in, then we're in trouble with the big boss. And that means we're going to be in trouble with Wall Street. And we cannot afford that, and so you will do the extra work. And I said, well, you know, they submit their budgets on a spreadsheet. Yes, no, but no, that's not from the mainframe. We don't trust the spreadsheet. I'm like, but I can add those. No, that's what TED and accounting does. I'm like, but I could literally do the consolidations in the touch of a button. It's just, but we have to check it twice. Okay? Why are you telling me all this? I'm the boss here. You're just a programmer. All right? Yes, boss. And then about three years later, a German company called SAP came in and they said, this is the accounting system you will use, and you will push this button and it will do the consolidations, and that's the way it will be. And everybody said, okay. We went away from building our own hand-built consolidation systems to using a very expensive and complicated accounting system built by a company in another country that we used to not like. And it was mind-bending to me. It was also mind-bending to me that Microsoft didn't do this in the early 90s. Be that as it may, we found out what we hated about doing on those 60-hour work weeks at the close of business and finance. Computers could do overnight, and sometimes within seconds. And so there was a revolution through the 90s of ERP integration. And everybody bought the ERP systems, Oracle Financials, PeopleSoft, SAP, Bond, And the same thing happened later on at the turn of the century with CRM, companies like Siebel and others that I don't remember. And then at some point, they all became software as a service. But the pricing model didn't change. So if you know where I'm going with this, raise your hand. SaaSpocalypse? SaaSpocalypse. And that's where I'm coming from, because I'm coming from the background of enterprise computer software. And I'm also coming from the background of somebody who really likes to go around and see how companies do their business. They're like, you're the Hyperion consultant. You do the S-based things. You're a database administrator. Why are you looking at our moat? Because in some way, your P&L is a capture of your process. The way you account for the money that you spend here, there, and elsewhere is an expression, a very concrete expression of the processes of your business. Okay? So when I get into the deep parts of corporate finance and accounting, those things become evident. And they have years and years of accumulation and cruft and standards, and they reflect changes in the way that we've done them. There have been internal changes and there have been external changes. For example, there's been SOX compliance. Okay? Anybody who's had to deal with SOX compliance has had to say, oh, we have to mean those departments when we mean departments. A department can't be just a person. Or we can't make this expense be an expense when it's used with that department and a revenue when it's used with that department. Okay? Those things make sense to mathematicians and computer scientists, but there were a way that business management could figure a way to make that make sense for your business. All I'm saying is that your particular process has a reason for what it's doing in all of that expresses itself in the shape of your business process. What is your business model, and how is it shaped as the moat that protects your castle? Your castle is all your assets, all your intelligences, all your people, all the effort they put into it, all the things they have survived, all the relationships they have made with customers, all the innovations they have made with products and services, and the trust and loyalty that you have amongst each other. That's real. And it's valuable. And you don't want to give that up. And what you have to do is trust in the process. Okay? And that is where you can say, well, maybe SAP wasn't right about that accounting thing. Or maybe, we had this shipping application. I'll give you an example of a company that I worked at, I consulted for in Atlanta. And this company made paper products. And it was very technology poor. But it was very spreadsheet sharp. Which means the owner and the son of the owner of the company was a senior vice president, and this spreadsheet wizard, she was the spreadsheet goddess, could, in a day or two, calculate the effects of any policy change for their whole business. And he had instincts, and he understood what that was, but it wasn't until his instincts and his insights translated into accounting and costing, and then put into that spreadsheet by the spreadsheet goddess, that we could see what was the bottom line. Was that a good idea? And so we did that exercise. I was very fortunate to do this as one of the most important, valuable lessons that I ever learned. And none of his warehouse managers had computers. None of them. But they all understood the company policy, because that's the way we do. That's how we roll. This is how we do it. And so what do? Well, we discount freight for our best customers. And we touch grass. We want to make sure that we have contact with those best customers all the time. And that keeps them coming back for our product. And that's why they are our best product, our best customers. Now, almost nobody at that time did a customer P&L. Okay? We didn't have ideas about long-term value for customers. We weren't doing it. We weren't tracking whales like Vegas does. We were just saying, these are our best customers. We'll give them a discount if they buy in bulk, because we knew that made our recurring revenue very good. Okay? And just being friendly, we said, we'll discount your freight 15%. And so one day, the boss says, I think we've been discounting freight on our biggest customers, but sending out trucks that aren't actually full. So he calls one of his warehouse managers. He says, who's your best customer? He says, of course you know who our best customer is. And how often do you go out to see him? Oh, once or twice a week. Every week? Oh, yeah, for sure. And how many pallets of our product do you load up on your truck? 3 or 4. And are those the big trucks? No, they're the small trucks. And how many pallets can you put on a small truck? Well, we could easily put 12 pallets on the small trucks. So you're sending the trucks out 2-3 times a week, and you're discounting freight. Now, some of you in shipping may understand that this is a horrible problem. But we calculated that afternoon with the assistance of the boss and the spreadsheet goddess, that was $1 million per year problem of discounting freight on half empty trucks. Because every time you have to do the mileage and you have to pay for the gas. So you could cut those costs a whole lot. But he says, how can I communicate that to everybody and incent them and change our payroll, because I can't get computers out to all of those guys. If I could get computers out to all those guys, then they could see it. So he had to initiate a different kind of discipline, which was a change of the way the rules worked, but the individual contributors couldn't see the value of that. Okay? Because it's hard for them to do the math in their heads where the computer does it like that. And you can show it graphically like that. All right? So he would have had to bought, I don't know how many computers, and the problem was networks, because this was before the days of Wi-Fi, of networking that many workstations, 50 warehouses. Very difficult challenge at that time. Not a challenge for any of us now. But the issue is, how do you change the moat? All right? If he had bought Oracle shipping software, whatever that was, and he had to do customer profitability, however we would calculate that, we would have to put those two metrics together so that we could find out how much to actually discount for which customers on which shipments, and make that into a clear thing that not only internally we could understand, but externally we could communicate to our customers. And that's a serious business problem which affects all of your logistics, but how do you express that? You can't just get a computer to do that. And that's where artificial intelligence comes in. It allows you to customize all of your compute processes. All right? Because we've bought SaaS, we've bought computer software as a service. It's a generic kind of thing. All right? So that when you call a customer service line, you will know exactly what you're going to hear. Your call is important to us. So let's sit on that. Let's marinate on that just for a moment. How could we do that if you were an airline? How many customer touch points do you have? How many logistical concerns do you have? Let's say you're in manufacturing. Okay? Where are all the places that are gaps in your software to understand the cognitive parts of your process and the intelligence of the people who are working in that process, to just do a little bit incrementally better. To let's say, let's just do a common sense thing here. The possibilities are enormous. They're enormous. Because we haven't been able to use our imaginations on how we could improve all of our processes because we're kind of strangled in our own data jails. So I use the term data jail because that's what I've been doing a lot of my career, which is going through accounting systems and inventory systems and logistics systems and customer service systems and parts inventory systems and manufacturing supply chain systems, and saying, you have all these one-off systems from your specialty vendors, and none of them have OLAP. None of them have something that can calculate a 7-dimensional model and put it into a spreadsheet or a chart or a moving thing. Okay, so enterprise data warehousing, self-service BI, and OLAP, that's what I've been doing. Analytics, not so much machine learning, but I understand, let's say, keyword golf bag, if we want to get back to that. So how can we get the custom software that we want? Well, the obvious answer is to hire software engineers. It is an obvious answer, but we haven't done that. The shape of the computer industry is not that we all hire software engineers. The shape of the computer industry is that Silicon Valley hires software engineers. They put together a product they think they will sell in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Kenosha, Wisconsin doesn't hire software engineers. If you're an Oshkosh manufacturer of fire trucks, you may have some CAD there because you do that design, but you don't design your accounting software. You don't design your logistics and inventory software there. You don't hire those kinds of people. There are companies that exist, obviously, like TCS and Deloitte, that hire consultants, that hire software engineers, that build products on standardized platforms that you buy. Okay? So that's the supply chain that we're looking at now, which is, how come you have to go, after all of these years, through these specialty companies that don't really understand your castle or your people, to just build them software that helps them do their own job? Why do I pay consultants to come in here? Why do I pay McKinsey to come in here? Why do I pay Bain to come in here and understand my business? I have to hit them to sign NDAs and intellectual property things to say they won't tell my competitors. You know, I've had talks with Safeway and Vons and HEB and the ones up north, I forget. They didn't want to do any business on Amazon. So they said Amazon is a competitor. They'll sneak into my software and figure out what I do. That's not the case. You can securely prove that, and it would give Amazon in a world of trouble. That didn't change people's proprietary nature. But it's very difficult to hire software engineers if you're not a software engineering company. Well, guess what? The AI revolution, among other things it means, is you don't have to be a software engineering company, because writing code is something these intelligences know how to do. And that is a natural evolution of what we do in computer science, because nobody writes assembler much anymore. You're a hacker. If you're in deep security, yeah, you would. But we expect assemblers to be done by software. We expect compilers to be done in software. We don't compile our own code. All right? We don't do bytecode translations of our own code. We use the JVM. Okay? So software does a damn good job of writing software, just not at the high abstract level. So how do we capture that high abstract level and turn it into good code? Well, that's an art and a science, but it's becoming more accessible to you and more composable to your moat. All right? So what you want to be able to do in the business capacity here is figure out how fast and how broad you can make your moat. Okay? And I slow down at these points because this is where my knowledge ends. I can write all kinds of software things for all kinds of theoretical problems, but it's only when I get and talk to someone near the top of their organization that I understand the kinds of problems that a business is facing. These are entirely mysterious to us software engineers, to us data engineers, to us machine learning people. Okay? We don't know. And so we can't build for those. And then those companies that have built stuff like that, custom, they had their own software engineers, we don't know if those conform to the best practices of software engineering. Okay? That's the other side of the coin. What we want to do with AI is to understand what makes our business unique and what can computer machines calculate quickly, repetitively, without ceasing, all right, that assists us in our cognition. We want to be augmented. We want to know, all right? If you're an engineer on a train, that kind of engineer, there's no way that you get to touch the fire inside that boiler. The superheated steam would take all the skin off your hand. But you know how hot it is, and you know how that beast runs when it is too cool, when it's only 2,500 degrees, or when it's 3,700 degrees, all right, where there's a risk of explosion, all right? And you know all the things that you have to control that because it's been designed that way, to run at a fine-tuned level. And it changes when the temperature changes because water boils at a different level when you're at a different elevation. It changes when the grip on the rails is slick because of ice. You have to pour sand on it. It changes when the outside axles are on a long bend and they have to go a little bit faster than the inside axles. And there's a lot of balances and things that you have to keep in mind. Okay? This is the case for all human-machine interactions. And so we have to learn how to do that with AI. And we have to learn how to do that with our business. Now, let's talk about agility. AI is going to offer us agility with speed because describing a problem to an AI and then having it do software engineer stuff can be very rapid, scary rapid. And sometimes that's a direct advantage that you can just depend on. And sometimes it adds more scrutiny that you have to look at in the code. And there are different specialists within the industry of continuous deployment and integration that look at that problem specifically. And there's going to be a new evolution of that as AI advances. But the bottom line is we can ask for customizations to our current code as soon as we say, oh, in the case of this customer that has these attributes, do this kind of thing. And then you can say, now back that off. Or do it for 30 days and tell us if it's a good idea or not. All right. We have that flexibility now. Once we have the agility built in our systems that allow us to make those kinds of customizations. All right. So knowing what kind of optimizations you have in your moat, in your critical path, in the special way that you guys do business, that's going to be the place where all the innovations can accrue. I'm going to stop talking now because I've done this without slides, and I've done this completely off the cuff. So that gives you an idea that I know what I'm talking about, even though I'm not making a formal presentation of this, and I need to shave, I need a little bit of haircut, and I am wearing actual pants. So this is Michael David Cobb Bowen, and you can see the value proposition that I'm giving and the way I would explain this to a new customer who's in a panic about what AI means. You have to be very specific to know what it means to your business, to the very specific ways you do business, and that it gives you agility in software development that you haven't had because you've been buying software off the shelf from very large vendors that you don't share your proprietary understanding of your business with. So it's going to give you that ability to accelerate and defend your company in that very particular way. And that's something no generalist is ever going to be able to figure out. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I don't know your business until I look at the very specific problems you are trying to solve and the ways that you do them. And my best example is pilots' union safety rules. If you're certified to fly 747 international, Airbus A320 or 380 international, and you have a tour of engagement, a tour of duty, how much sleep are you supposed to get? And what can happen along the way that changes the very specific things that means? That's a very complex thing. It's a very complex thing. And I'll leave it at that. Anyway, talk to you later.